YouTube? This is Ty, Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you guys are having a good Thursday. We're getting close to the weekend, but that also means that this pattern change that a lot of us have been talking about, I think I mentioned it maybe once on this channel. I haven't covered that real closely due to all the stuff going on in the tropics, but we'll briefly touch on that, but we're also going to be mainly focusing on the tropics in this video. So if you're interested in the tropical stuff, I'm just going to tell you now, skip to this maybe the second quarter of this video. I'm going to try to keep this a little bit short, but we're going to try to also make this fully loaded tropical update. But let's go ahead and talk about the temperatures first. Oops. So we're just going to go into tomorrow, basically because, I mean, I'll be doing a weekend forecast. Kind of trying to see if I could do it tomorrow morning, but that depends on how early I get up and if I have enough time in the morning to quickly make that before heading to work. And then if that goes well, then Friday afternoon we'll talk about the upcoming pattern changes. But in the meantime, let's talk about tomorrow morning in particular, because that's going to be a big talking point. So you can almost kind of see it right now. We have this cold front that's situated right here. This little highlighted area. Well, I wouldn't call it high. I guess you could call it highlighted area because the brighter colors are here. But the difference between, you can see where the cold front line is, so to speak, because you have temperatures that are about 80 degrees. This is over towards where I live, by the way, in Atlanta. But we have temperatures towards 80, but once we get towards central Tennessee, we're getting towards the 60s and quickly pushing towards the 50s. And this is pretty much going to be our giant cool down for the entire country, pretty much. So, get into the overnight hours, and you see that cold air starting to come in from Canada here. And you can see that it's already working its way into the northeast. We have areas that are getting into the some places even low 40s. By maybe as early as about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and we'll push this further along, and these temperatures even will start to dip into the 30s up there. Towards the further south you go, I mean, of course, it's going to be a little warm, but not by much, because we even have places like Atlanta, Charleston starting to dip below 60 for lows tonight, which is a very welcome sight for a lot of us. Especially me, because I'm a landscaper. I work as a landscaper, and good God, it has been hot this summer. But you can see that nobody's really exempt from this, even towards the southernmost parts of Texas here. We're getting into those lower 70s. We normally have had mornings where we've been sitting at about 80, sometimes not even getting below 90 at night. So I'm sure this is a welcome change for them too. We do get a bit of a warm up, but temperatures are definitely going to be a sharp contrast to what they've been in a lot of areas this Friday and into the weekend, which is going to be great news. And this pattern trend looks like it hangs on throughout the week. But again, like I said before, we will go over that in a video. If not tomorrow afternoon, then Saturday for sure. But let's go ahead and talk about the main part of this video here, and that's going to be the tropics. It's the most, actually, this is a pretty out-of-date update here. Let's go ahead and refresh this real quick. Okay, there we go. I was about to say, that was a little odd. 2 o'clock update. Okay, so here we are at our 8 o'clock advisory here. And we still have Hurricane Fiona out here at sea, bringing tropical storm force conditions and potentially even hurricane force conditions to Bermuda a little bit later tonight. Tropical storm conditions, I think, are actually already occurring over there. There are tropical storm and hurricane warnings issued over there for the entire island. And then we also have Tropical Storm Gadsden getting over to the Azores over here. Actually has held up very well. We're sitting at 65 miles an hour. Central pressure just now hitting under 1,000. So this storm's held up pretty good. It's expected to do all sorts of loops and bits in the Atlantic here. We'll go ahead and look at the track real quick before we do anything else. But this storm looks like it hangs on pretty well. Even into next week, it becomes extra tropical, but it does hang in there. But we are going to have to watch for tropical storm conditions around all of the Azores, and maybe even a potential land grazing type of landfall towards the west and maybe even central Azores. So now that we've gone over that, we may as well go ahead and take a look at Fiona's track. Not too much has changed with her except her speed. She is now moving at 20 miles an hour. Intensity is no different than what it was before, but this is a potentially historic scenario that we have playing out over here. We have hurricane warnings in effect for Bermuda, as I mentioned earlier, but now we have tropical storm and hurricane watches in effect for Newfoundland and Nova Scotia over here. So I guess in a sense, you can say that we're ringing the alarm for you guys, because even though this becomes extra tropical in nature, this still will have hurricane force wind gusts or hurricane force wind sustained winds and wind gusts, and will be bringing large swells into the area. This could knock out power to a lot of people, and there's a very big flood threat with this as well. This actually looks like it kind of slows down a little bit, not a lot, but I expect about maybe a full day's worth of deteriorating weather conditions once we get into the weekend. I think by early Sunday it starts to move out, but not before doing its damage for a lot of areas around here, around the Atlantic Canada. Then eventually it gets potentially even as close as Greenland before starting to weaken and die out. Maybe even the final remnants of this may reach Greenland. Who knows? But this is a very rare situation. You don't see this very often, where a big storm like this is heading towards this part of the world. So we're going to definitely keep watching this as we go through the weekend as well. So plenty to cover here on my end. Happy to keep pushing out content to you guys, though, so I have no issues with it. Then, of course, we have our 3 tropical disturbances. Now, of course, we know about this system right here. 90% chance of developing, almost completely certain that this storm becomes potentially the next named storm. This may beat it out, possibly, but it has to do something and do so very quickly to become Hermine before Invest 98L here. Otherwise, the next storm after Hermine would be Ian. This feature right here has a chance of development, but it's in marginal conditions as it's spoken right here through this synopsis. Low chance of development, but steady development is possible. So we'll have to see what it does, but a lot of these storms often come out to die over here. Maybe there's a chance it could form up around here if it gets that far. But we're mainly going to be talking about this. Let's take a look at the satellite for everything. So here is Gatson sitting around the Azores here. Not the most organized storm, but you can definitely tell that there's a good center of circulation there, and we can expect deteriorating conditions very soon around the Azores, probably within the next 12 to 24 hours. I can say the same just about for Bermuda as well. It's kind of hard to see in the map here, but it's this tiny little dot where I have my arrow pointing. I think the next 12 to 24 hours, conditions will only begin to worsen as the wind speeds will start to increase, as the waves and surf are already at a very high point. Thankfully, though, this will not be making a direct landfall over this area, but this island is built for these kinds of situations. So, considering how we've had much worse storms impact this area, it shouldn't be too bad. I'm most concerned about flooding rain, but beyond that, I think these guys will be all right over here. So here's our next tropical wave here. Looks like that's coming off the West African coast here. Already starting to make that turn, but it does look like it's trying to get its act together pretty nicely, I would say. You can start to see some of that counterclockwise rotation beginning to take effect around this low. So maybe a storm could form within the next 48 hours with this. With this storm, I'm not super optimistic about it. I mean, you can see some storms trying to form around the low pressure around our low pressure here. Storm trying to breathe out, but it's not really in a super favorable environment. And then when we look over here, you can almost kind of tell that there's a bit of wind shear going on, which is going to play a huge role in potentially destroying the storm before it even gets off the ground, so to speak. Then we look over here, and over the last couple of scans, we're finally leaving the wake of Hurricane Fiona, which is actually what's ironically been stopping this system from really starting to get itself organized. It's been caught in the wake of Fiona, and those winds have been coming from the north, not only knocking the tops off of these storms, but basically keeping these storms forming around the center of Invest 98L here. And as we all know, as you can even see with Fiona right now, you can see that eye wall. It's very clear, not a lot of clouds over it. So if you want any sort of tropical development, you need a storm that can breathe outward and vent that energy. And that just hasn't happened with 98L yet. Odds are it's going to, and we're going to go ahead and get into that in just a minute. Let's go ahead and go over to cyclocane. I cannot talk for anything tonight. I'm so sorry, you guys. But we'll go over to cyclocane, and we will go ahead and take a look at the spaghetti models for, I guess they're calling it 97L. I thought it was 98L. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, I've clicked the wrong thing, obviously. Okay, here we are. So go ahead and click on this feature and have to zoom in the manual way, if it'll let me. Okay. All right, here we go. Info is a little bit out of date on this. Maybe I need to refresh this. But no, jeez, this thing does not want to work with me. Also, one thing that I would also like to note as I continue to go through this video here is, due to the recent interest, especially of this invest right here, that a lot of traffic has been ongoing with a lot of weather forecasting websites such as Pivotal Weather and Tropical Tidbits, Cyclocane included. A lot of these sites are free, but as a result, though, they aren't sometimes ready to handle the kind of traffic like what we're seeing with them right now as we start to look at bigger storms. So as a result, these may go a little bit slower, so just please bear with me now that you guys know that. So here's our 98A or 98L as it's called right here. And we'll go ahead and look at the track. Not too much. There have been a few updates with this, but not anything out of the ordinary, not anything that we haven't already been talking about. You can clearly see, oops, let's go zoom back in a little bit further. But model confidence has not changed too much. It does look like we're going to get a storm, and I'm also going to say we may as well start to ring the alarm here in Jamaica, because odds are this storm is going to either make a landfall or a very close pass. And then, of course, anyone that's in Cuba, I'm looking at you too. You need to be watching this really closely. As of right now, I'm also saying Florida. I'm going to say I wouldn't necessarily say it's you just yet, but you do need to be watching this, because over the last few days, this model trend has held up quite consistently that this storm is going to go into the Gulf. And at this point, it's still fair game, as you guys are very much fair game. It kind of lends itself towards forming within the next couple of days and pushing more to the east. The best case scenario for areas in Florida would be for this to take a little bit longer to form, and by it doing so, it's going to take more of a westward track, kind of like Fiona did. Well, Fiona took more of a southern track but ultimately would end up hitting Puerto Rico, whereas before it was going to probably skirt the leewards and go out to sea a little bit quicker. But that didn't happen. But that's the best case scenario for Florida because it would take it more of a south and western track. This, however, would probably run it into the Yucatan, hitting different parts of Mexico and maybe just hitting Mexico entirely and leaving the U.S. out. But the odds of that happening are decreasing bit by bit with each day. What we're looking at right now, the highest probability right now seems to be a storm that goes through this strait in the Caribbean Sea, makes a close pass to Jamaica, if not a landfall, and then maybe has some interaction with Cuba, and then goes out into the Gulf and could be a potential impact for either Western Florida or the Gulf of Mexico, or some of the Gulf states over here. I still wouldn't exclude Houston just yet, but New Orleans, Mobile, Biloxi, all of you guys need to be watching this really closely. We'll go ahead and take a look at the models too real quick and just kind of get an idea of what's going on. Again, keep in mind, like I said before, and it even will say it on this site here, due to high traffic this week, you will experience slow page and load image times. Alright, so we see Fiona right here. Here's our Invest 98L, and we'll move this along. And this is about, just trying to slow down right now. And this is on Saturday. This looks a lot more organized on the ISO bars here. Also keep in mind this is the 12Z because we can't even get 18Z uploaded yet because of the extreme traffic that we're dealing with right now. So this forms up here, and according to the Euro, this kind of takes that slightly more western track, but ultimately it strengthens pretty fast and eventually towards the Florida Keys and maybe even towards Orlando, maybe just south of Tampa Bay, ends up making landfall as a potentially large, maybe even major hurricane, and then ends up being kicked out to sea, which is the latest model run. We've seen a few different ones. It'll be interesting to see what 18Z has to offer. I may go over that tomorrow if I have the time, but I'm going to be covering a lot of different stuff, so I'm just trying to wear as many hats as I can here. But let's go to the GFS, and we'll go ahead and start it all over. Alright, again, here's Fiona. This is the 18Z GFS. The GFS always loads a little bit faster than the Euro. Euro's a little bit harder to access for us in the US, of course, because it's a European model. This is a global model, so it's going to be a lot easier for us to get a hold of. So we'll move this along, and of course the GFS always likes to do a little bit more aggressive runs, but GFS has this pushing more towards the Florida Panhandle, and this also could become a very dangerous situation, not just for the Florida Panhandle or Gulf Coast, but also the inland areas, even Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. We could have a storm that hangs around for about a couple of days towards the end of the month here, because this looks like it starts to make landfall right around either early Friday morning or late Thursday night. Then once we go into Friday morning, it's just going to be raining the entire day, and this hangs around into Saturday, pushes through into Sunday even, and we're still dealing with rain as it starts to push into the North Atlantic. So flood threat is a big concern of mine, and that's that. We're also going to go ahead and go to the end of this here to see, I'm going to go towards the end of this model run here to see if there's anything else that we might need to watch out for right now according to the models. So right now, I'm going to say, wait a minute, hold the phone. Looks like I do see something. Where's my mouse at? Okay, there we go. We do see something that pops up right here about 348 hours out. Have to take it with a grain of salt, but this could be yet another big system in the making here for the Gulf Coast and Mexico here. So we'll have to watch We'll have to keep an eye on that. So far, it doesn't look like it forms in anything, but that's still something else to watch on what's already becoming a very active environment in the tropics. All right, so we'll go ahead and look at the ensembles over the Atlantic Basin, just to kind of get an idea of what else could lie ahead. Here's our Invest. Here's Gadsden. Here's Fiona. And here's our other two tropical waves. Here's our Ridge, which has been pretty much our entire steering current and has been throwing a lot of these tropical waves out to sea. We'll roll this along here. Uh-oh. See what I'm talking about? This is the issue that we're dealing with right now. So I'm going to have to go a little bit slower with these. But, oh boy. So we have our two tropical waves right now getting kicked out to sea. Of course, not much is expected to change. Still plenty of pieces of energy flying about in the Gulf. Well, not the Gulf, but you know what I mean. The main development region here. It's about 234 hours out. We see yet another big piece of energy potentially flying around, but of course, with our steering current being where it is, this ridge is going to ultimately prevent a lot of storms from either forming or being a big threat to land as of right now. This is our Euro ensemble, so we'll go ahead and take a look at the GFS ensemble here, and then we'll go from that point. And this model run is still in progress, so we're only going to get about another 240 hours out of it. But I expect to really see more of the same from it. Again, here's our tropical waves getting kicked out to sea a little bit quicker on here versus the Euro, but we also see a couple more pieces of energy flying off of West Africa a little bit faster. And of course, like once they start to strengthen it, that's when they really start to take those bigger turns. And beyond that, really, once we get into that steering current like what we have here, it's usually good night Irene. How ironic, Irene being a hurricane name. But from that point, it's usually good night, because they go into the northern parts of the Atlantic where the wind shear is not favorable and the water temperatures are a bit cooler, whereas Gulf of Mexico, completely different story. So that's why I'm extra watchful right now of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, because that's going to be a very big component as far as any potential mass land impact type storms, so to speak. But this is all I got for you guys on this video tonight. It's a fully loaded tropical update. Also, be watchful of those early morning temperatures. Jeez, almost 25-minute video. Hey, I do this because I love it at the end of the day. Hopefully I didn't bore all of you. But until the next video, this has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. I hope to see you in the morning, if not tomorrow afternoon.